I did know that there was something about me that separated me from my classmates. Yeah, it was one of those things that I just couldn't put my finger on. It was a little hard for me to tell because this was something that I was born into. I didn't have much of a frame of reference to compare it to.
Most people have heard of autism and know how profound a mental illness it can be. But what about Asperger Syndrome? Even though it's considered to be on the mild end of the autism spectrum, its consequences in socializing and in life can be very serious. The elusiveness of Asperger Syndrome. This week on My Healthy Mind. Let's talk about it. Welcome to My Healthy Mind. I'm Michael Hunter. Suffering from Asperger syndrome is hard enough with its painful communication and social interaction difficulties. But even more heartbreaking is that most people don't realize, at least not right away, that Asperger syndrome, a very subtle condition, is the cause of this social awkwardness. So many times the sufferer receives no treatment and no sympathy. Until 1994, Asperger syndrome was not even a recognized diagnosis. Its symptoms were classified as other things: autism, attention deficit disorder, learning disabilities, which meant that people with Asperger syndrome were being treated for the wrong condition.
There are a lot of difficulties that are related to Asperger syndrome, but there are also a lot of really great things related to Asperger's as well. Extreme focus, great memory. They're oftentimes really interested in a specific topic, and they learn a lot about that topic, and it can be very, very useful in certain settings, whether it be in an employment setting or in a special academic setting, if they are motivated to learn a certain topic. If you can capture that topic or whatever interest that person has and use it to motivate them, it can be really, really helpful and beneficial.
Today, my colleague Elizabeth Atkins will be speaking with Sean Rosen, a young, highly accomplished individual with Asperger syndrome, and with Dr. Sally Bloch, who not only specializes in Asperger syndrome, but who just happens to be Sean's mother. Sean and his family have been through a lot together. As a toddler, he began to exhibit some unusual behaviors, symptoms of something they didn't understand at the time: short attention span, clumsiness, withdrawal, irritability. And yet, he was obviously intelligent, inquisitive, and very creative. It wasn't until he received an accurate diagnosis that things began to add up.
Sean and Sally, welcome to My Healthy Mind.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sean, you're welcome. Sean, we've learned about your condition, and we've learned about what both of you have been through living with Asperger syndrome. So Sean, can we start with you telling us about your early childhood and family life?
Yeah, I think I was a pretty happy kid. Like some of my teachers noticed that not so much that I didn't get along well with other kids. It wasn't like that. It was just sort of more like I was avoiding playing with the other kids. Well, another interesting fact was, I think you can back me up on this. I knew how to read before I knew how to hold a conversation with another person.
Yeah, or to even generate a spontaneous sentence that you didn't steal from television.
Yeah.
And what age did that occur, that you could read?
About 2.5.
Oh, wow.
He could read
my
everything.
gosh.
He could decode. Yeah, it was amazing.
So when did you, those are like signs of extreme intelligence, and yet there seemed to have been a deficit there. So when did you notice first the symptoms of Asperger syndrome?
Well, as a baby, he was my firstborn. His sleep patterns were terrible. I got so little sleep after 18 months, I started to see, like I'd swat at bugs that weren't there.
Oh
because
my goodness.
It would be like an hour and a half of screaming and an hour and a half of sleep, and for really prolonged periods. And a real sensitivity to different textures, like he couldn't wear disposable diapers, they had to be not just cloth, but cloth that I washed, because the diaper service, they were slightly different texture than if you do it yourself. Fun fact. So I noticed those peculiarities, but it didn't really come together to make a syndrome yet, because his developmental milestones were pretty much on target. So pediatricians were like, he's fine, he'll be okay. He's just got a funny temperament. So.
Sally, were you familiar enough with Asperger's syndrome to recognize Sean's symptoms?
No, because actually Asperger's did not make its way into the diagnostic manual here in the United States until 1994, I believe. And the way he presented really did not fit the current, at the time current, definition of autism. So he had a real hodgepodge of like a speech and language disorder, an ADHD, and I can't even remember what else at the time. When it did come out, and I first got the manual, the diagnostic manual, and read the definition, it was like, oh my gosh, he fit it so perfectly.
And how old was he at that point?
He was 8 or 9.
So Sean, at what age did you begin to feel that something might be amiss?
Yeah, it was a little hard for me to tell because this was something that I was born into. I didn't have much of a frame of reference to compare it to, but I did know that there was something about me that separated me from my classmates. Yeah, it was one of those things that I just couldn't put my finger on.
Asperger syndrome has often been misdiagnosed in children as ADHD, among others. But when treatment is sought for associated issues like anxiety and depression, Asperger syndrome is usually first diagnosed.
Stress, depression, and severe mental illness can happen to anyone. Team Mental Health Services has been helping those struggling with these conditions in southeastern Michigan. Within 24 hours of reaching out to our team, members receive psychiatric evaluations and begin the necessary treatment for recovery.
Towards the 6th court date, I finally stood up and said, I can handle this process the rest of the way. And it was all because of the motivation and encouragement I got from Team Mental Health staff.
Team Mental Health Services, because we care and you can.
A lot of times people with Asperger syndrome aren't diagnosed at very early ages, the way that someone with autism spectrum disorder diagnosis might get diagnosed. So someone with more classic autism might get diagnosed at a younger age because they're showing potentially cognitive deficits or other language difficulties and challenges that oftentimes people with Asperger's don't show. So people with Asperger's oftentimes don't get diagnosed until they're a little bit older, whether it be middle school, high school, college, or even beyond. Many times, nowadays especially, there are more and more adults getting diagnosed with Asperger's because it's not until they're into those social situations and having more relationships or attempting those social relationships that they're then realizing that there might be something different or they're having more challenges than a typical person might have, and that's when they're getting the diagnosis.
Welcome back to My Healthy Mind. Today we're talking about Asperger syndrome with Sean and his mother, Dr. Sally Bloch, who share their journey together from the discovery of Sean's condition in childhood to his remarkable life as an accomplished adult.
So, Sally, take us to that point where you said you identified that this is Asperger syndrome. Tell us, how did that change anything? Were you able to get appropriate and helpful treatment? Did you feel more confident that you knew what you were facing?
It was great. It was a great moment to see one unifying diagnosis that covered all these quirks. And then the other piece was it was known in Europe. So there was a database to actually look at. So it really, the label opened up the door to this information that I would not have accessed before. he was all along getting like speech therapy, occupational therapy, in a social skills group. So I think a lot of the things would have been ultimately the same, but it made it so much easier to communicate to other professionals, especially within the school district, and then to access the types of interventions that were in what literature there was, that was mostly from Europe, to guide what we were doing instead of this hodgepodge of things that really didn't apply to him. They weren't really targeted to the Asperger's way of thinking.
Mm-hmm. So when you say interventions, do you mean treatments?
I guess I lump a lot of things under interventions, like modifications in day-to-day life. Little changes at school, like he was allowed to leave classes like 3 minutes early so that he could avoid all the noise and chaos of the hallway, because it was understood that now this is something on the autism spectrum. So it started to make sense, and it wasn't chalked up to being spoiled or willful.
It's very unusual that you were playing this dual role. You were his mother, and yet you were a clinical psychologist specializing in Asperger syndrome. Can you tell us what that was like, playing that dual role?
I didn't even really see it as a dual role exactly. There was so much to learn about what was going on with Sean, so I would go, like Yale was a big hub of research, it still is, so they would have special seminars and I would go to those. There was not time to have another specialty because all my resources were going towards learning more about what was going on, with my own son. It always seemed to me that they just came together in this beautiful way.
So Sean, once you had the diagnosis and learned the term Asperger syndrome, did it help you feel more comfortable and confident with yourself and your place in the world?
It helped to know that the ways that I was different, it was good to know that it had a name.
We'll have more when we come back about Asperger syndrome and one family's struggle with the condition and its social side effects. Please stay tuned. Welcome to My Healthy Mind.
A show that dares to talk about mental health matters that touch nearly every family. Each week you'll meet guests who share their stories, hear from local experts, and learn about resources that may help.
And so I was in a committee meeting at the House of Representatives when I realized that my daughter had autism.
We need to take the stigma away from mental health issues.
No topics about mental health and wellness are off limits on our show.
Let's talk about it on My Healthy Mind.
There's a number of different kinds of interventions that have been shown to be really highly effective with people with Asperger syndrome. And it's important that they're evidence-based treatments and interventions. Things like social skills training. Social skills training can be in a group format or it can be in an individual one-on-one kind of format. And that's been shown to be really highly advantageous to teach the social skills, as well as cognitive behavioral therapy or cognitive behavioral interventions, which help people who have Asperger syndrome to help give them the self-awareness that they need to navigate and really do well in social situations. Other interventions include prompting, whether it be visual, gesture prompting, actual physical prompting can be very, very helpful. The same with video modeling has been shown to be a very, very effective strategy for working with individuals with Asperger's, because you can watch it and see the evolution of what a social situation should look like.
We're back on My Healthy Mind, looking into the struggle with Asperger syndrome, why it has traditionally been so difficult to correctly identify, and how to successfully deal with this often elusive condition. Elizabeth Atkins continues.
Sean, you also started working with dogs and working with children and dogs. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, the thing with animals is, let me put it like this. When I'm interacting with another person, it's kind of like you ever tried watching a bunch of TVs at once, and they're all tuned to different channels, and I think that's kind of similar to my experiences with interacting with others. Like I not only do I have to pay attention to the words they're saying, but also their tone of voice, where their eyes are looking, their facial expressions, their posture, the position of their arms and legs. With people, it's like trying to watch multiple channels. But when interacting with animals, it's like they only have one channel.
That's a fascinating way to put that.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think we're pretty much the only species that on this planet that's actually capable of lying to each other. Animals, they don't lie to you.
So let's talk about treatment. Is there medication? Is there therapy? What is the treatment for Asperger's?
Well, there isn't a unitary treatment. So it's very much based on what is the functional difficulty the person's having. So if they're depressed, they might have therapy for the depression. They might have medication that helps depression. There can be executive function problems like paying attention, remembering what needs to be remembered, that type of thing. Speech therapy, language, usually they work on language processing and pragmatic speech, so using language to socialize and to explain what's happened to you, which tends to be a deficit area for individuals with Asperger's. And then there was psychotherapy and medication off and on, especially to help with the sleep and with paying attention. I think one friend of mine said, you know, it just boils down to one thing, hard work over time. There's not a magic bullet. Oh, and infinite patience, so 2 things.
You've had a positive outcome as a result.
Well, yeah, I think we've had a positive outcome.
So Sean, what treatments do you think were most effective for you?
I remember stuff like playing board games with the therapist, like stuff like Guess Who.
What they were working on, there's something called theory of mind, which is a deficit with Asperger's and autism, where we're constantly developing theories about what's in the other person's mind. Am I boring that person? Am I interesting? Am I emitting a bad odor? I mean, you look to facial expression to get an idea of what, I think of it like what someone's thought bubble is.
And also that's also kind of why I named my student film Mind Blind.
Tell us about your student film.
I was going to this film workshop, and so I thought a good idea would be to try to give kind of a visual metaphor for like what it's like living on the spectrum, or at least a facet of what it's like. Tuning out was never really a choice I made. It was more like being a radio, not quite able to tune in to a station clear enough to hear it properly. Most of the time it was static, and that made the faces static too. Until one day. The main character is a young man who goes to school just like any other day, except he sees everybody else in the classroom wearing these white masks that don't give any facial expressions, that don't react. Just like as though only the main character could see them. Like none of the other characters can see them.
Maybe he's really focused.
Hey, Michael. Michael. Maybe he likes spinning the wheels.
Maybe he just loves trucks.
Maybe he's just being a boy.
Preoccupation with objects is one early sign of autism. Learn the others today. The sooner it's diagnosed, the better.
So people with Asperger syndrome often do have a lot of challenges, especially related to the social situations and interactions and developing relationships, especially into their adult life. They can have a lot of difficulties finding employment and maintaining employment. And that's where we want to continue to offer programs for them so that they can move past those challenges and learn to adapt to the neurotypical world, so to speak.
Though Asperger syndrome can be very difficult to diagnose, Sean is living proof that with proper therapies, this elusive condition can be successfully managed.
So you have really triumphed over dealing with Asperger syndrome, and you live a remarkably rich life. So we want to hear more about how you've gone to college, what you've studied. Can you tell us about that?
Sure, yeah. Long story short, I graduated in 2013 with a Bachelor of Arts in Writing and Rhetoric for New Media.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. What do you do with that now?
I'm working in the e-commerce department. I'm given items that are up for sale. I take photos of them. I edit them. I correct the colors, and I post the items on the store's website.
Do you socialize with people who have Asperger's?
I've interacted with people on the spectrum of who are just all around it, all around the spectrum.
Do you have like a support group or a support network? You know, as sort of that affirmation and fun. Do you have that?
I go on Facebook. There's there's actually multiple Asperger syndrome support groups there on Facebook that it allows people to communicate with one another, as I'm sure we all know. Yeah, it allows for groups of people to interact with each other who might have never known about each other if had this tool not been available.
Sally, as a psychologist and as a mother, what advice do you have for parents of children with Asperger syndrome?
Well, I think one of the first things I would say is to not be afraid of the label. And I understand that feeling like my child's being reduced to a label of some kind. However, the purpose of labels is ultimately to let bureaucracies and professionals communicate in an efficient way. And without the label, there's all kinds of things your insurance company and your school district will not give you. I would also really recommend researching. There's a lot of treatments out there, and especially as autism became more in the mainstream, a lot of them have absolutely not a shred of evidence, and it's something that I think as a mom and as a professional, I find upsetting because families have limited resources, and a lot of these places are asking for an enormous amount of money for something that not only do we not have evidence that it works, but we have evidence it does not work. And I think that's just tragic. And I think lastly, one thing that's played on my mind as I've watched Sean grow up and my friends' children who have Asperger's as well grow up is don't be afraid to set limits with your child. You apply the rules differently and with understanding and with additional time built in to help them pick up on these things, but we want to set our children up to function in society when we're long gone. And so to do that, it's really important that we just keep on setting those limits and teaching those lessons, even if it takes many, many more repetitions and many different ways of getting the message across, that it's just very important and I think crucial to a good outcome for adulthood.
Stress, depression, and severe mental illness can happen to anyone. Team Mental Health Services has been helping those struggling with these conditions in southeastern Michigan. Within 24 hours of reaching out to our team, members receive psychiatric evaluations and begin the necessary treatment for recovery.
Towards the 6th court date, I finally stood up and said, I can handle this process the rest of the way. And it was all because of the motivation and encouragement I got from Team Mental Health staff.
Team Mental Health Services, because we care and you can.
Elizabeth, what a wonderful and inspiring story about patience and perseverance, about believing in someone, believing in each other, and triumphing together.
And for people who struggle with Asperger syndrome, it's so difficult to be understood because the condition can be so elusive. But it's heartening to know that with the proper diagnosis and treatment, people with this disorder can integrate happily and successfully into society. To help you on your quest for mental wellness, we've put information and resources on our website, myhealthymind.com. Please take a look. Visiting myhealthymind.com could be an excellent first step on living a life that's rewarding and full with Asperger syndrome.
And we'd like to hear from you about the topics you'd like us to discuss. I mean the tough topics that are so important to talk about openly so that we can remove the barriers on the road to well-being. So reach out to us on our website at myhealthymind.com, on Twitter at myhealthymind, or on Facebook.
Thank you for watching. We'll see you next week for another edition of My Healthy Mind. Let's talk about it. And now, My Healthy Minute.
My Healthy Minute, covering breaking mental health news, legislation, discoveries, and resources.
The Autism Alliance of Michigan is a statewide nonprofit organization. Our mission is to improve the lives of individuals with autism and their families across the state of Michigan. The Autism Alliance serves families through our 3 pillars of community work, advocacy work, and then navigation. In particular, we wanted to share our navigation work, getting families and individuals into the healthcare providers and evidence-based care that they need, overcoming the hurdles and barriers of insurance and the processes along the way. Advocacy for insurance legislation, Medicaid, special education, and employment reform, in addition to some other things. And then, of course, community work through some fun events for families, bringing the autism community together and making sure that we're included in the community at large and with their neurotypical peers safely and in a welcoming manner. So there is a 1-800 number that folks can call, and they'll immediately be connected with a navigator for themselves or their loved one, and as well as information on our website, resources that can help tap into services regardless of what their issue is. We work with folks across the state of Michigan, state agencies and private providers, and figure if we can't help them find the answer, we just may not have come up with one yet or overcome that hurdle as a state.